Franz Kafka was a great Czech writer who has come to own a part of the human emotional spectrum, which we can now call the Kafkaesque, and which, thanks to him, we're able better to recognize and to gain a measure of perspective over and relief from. Kafka's world isn't pleasant. It feels in many ways like a nightmare, and yet it's a place where many of us will, even if only for a time, in the dark periods of our lives, end up. We're in the world defined by Kafka when we feel powerless in front of authority, judges, aristocrats, industrialists, politicians, and most of all, fathers. When we feel that our destiny is out of our control, when we're bullied, humiliated and mocked by society, and especially by our own families. Franz Kafka was born in Prague in 1883, the eldest child of a terrifyingly psychologically abusive father, and a mother who was too weak and in awe of her husband to protect her boy as she should have done. Kafka grew up timid, bookish, meek, and full of self-hatred. He wanted to become a writer, but it was out of the question in his father's eyes. So one of the greatest German literary geniuses since Goethe was forced to spend his brief life on earth working in a series of jobs utterly beneath him. Just 3 collections of short stories, including his best-known work, The Metamorphosis, and he was entirely obscure and unnoticed. His gigantic posthumous reputation is based on 3 novels, The Trial, The Castle, and America, which were all unfinished because Kafka was so dissatisfied with them. He gave orders that they be destroyed after his death. Fortunately for humanity, these were disobeyed.
Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Part 1. When Gregor Samsa woke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a monstrous insect. He was lying on his hard, shell-like back, and when he lifted his head a little, he could see his dome-shaped brown body, banded with reinforcing arches, on top of which the blanket maintained its precarious hold. His numerous legs, pitifully thin in relation to the rest of his bulk, danced ineffectually before his eyes. What has happened to me, he thought. It was not a dream. His room, a normal, though rather too small human room, lay peacefully between the 4 familiar walls. Above the table, on which a collection of cloth samples had been laid out, Samsa was a traveling salesman, hung the picture that he had recently cut out of a magazine and mounted in a pretty gilt frame. It showed a lady in a fur hat and boa. Gregor's eyes then focused on the window and the gloomy weather. You could hear raindrops beating on the metal windowsill. God, he thought. What a strenuous profession I've chosen. All this wretched travelling. These early mornings are very bad for the brain. A man needs his sleep. Oh, to hell with it all. If it hadn't been for my parents, I'd have handed my notice in long ago. Oh well, there's still a gleam of hope. Once I've got the money together to pay back what they owe my boss, it might take another 5 or 6 years. I'll definitely do it. I'll make a fresh start. Meanwhile, though, I'd better get up. My train leaves at 5. And he looked across to the alarm clock that was ticking on the chest of drawers. God almighty, he thought. It was 6:30, and the hands were moving steadily forwards. Might the alarm not have rung? He could see from the bed that it had been set correctly to go off at 4. It must have rung. Yes, but was it possible to sleep calmly through that furniture-shaking racket? Well, he hadn't exactly slept calmly, but that probably meant he had slept all the more soundly. But what should he do now? The next train left at 7. To catch that would mean a frantic rush, and the samples had not been packed, and he wasn't exactly feeling especially fresh and mobile. And even if he did catch the train, he could expect a thundering tirade from his boss, because the office boy would have met the 5 o'clock train and reported his absence long ago. The boy was his boss's lackey, a spineless, mindless creature. While he was considering all this, there was a cautious tap at the door near the top of his bed. "Gregor," called the voice. It was his mother. "It's 7:15. Didn't you have a train to catch?" That gentle voice. Gregor gave a start when he heard his own voice answer. It was unmistakably his own, but mingling with it, as if from below, was a painful, not-to-be-suppressed squeak that uttered the words clearly only for a second. It had been Gregor's intention to answer at length and explain everything, but in the circumstances he confined himself to saying, "Yes, thank you, Mother. I'm just getting up." Due to the wooden door, the change in Gregor's voice was presumably not noticeable from the outside, for his mother went shuffling off. But this brief exchange had alerted the other members of the family to the fact that Gregor was still at home, and already his father was knocking at one of the side doors with his fist. "Gregor! Gregor! What is it?" At the door on the other side, however, came the soft, plaintive voice of his sister. "Gregor, aren't you well? Do you need anything?" "Just coming," he replied in both directions, and tried through enunciating as clearly as possible and leaving long pauses between the words to make his voice sound as inconspicuous as possible. His father went back to his breakfast, but his sister whispered, "Gregor, open up, please." But Gregor had no intention of opening the door, and congratulated himself on his prudent habit adopted from his travels of locking all the doors at night, even when he was at home.
Gregor?
Gregor? Gregor, are you unwell?
Gregor!
Gregor, your supervisor is here.
I have come to inquire after Mr. Samsa. Mr. Samsa Jr., that is, of course.
Did you hear him speak?
That was an animal's voice.
Greta, get a doctor, quick! For the love of God, and I saw it! I saw it! I can't stay here any longer.
What are you giving me?
It's not my fault. You beast! You think I don't look after him? You think I can't clean him out?
Good afternoon, madam.
Come on then, you smelly old woodlouse! Mr. Samsa!
We must stop believing that it's Gregor anymore. Our misfortune is that we've gone on believing it for so long.
Don't you dare! Haven't you done enough already?
Leave him.
I just want to see my son.